but we might be seeing a new divide here in college football soon. We're starting to enter in a brand new era in terms of, Nick Saban retiring. We're also seeing the expansion of the college football playoff, NIL, and the transfer portal becoming more prevalent. And what we have seen through these last few years, and while I am a supporter of NIL. I'm a supporter of these student athletes, getting their fair cut of revenue because these schools do make quite a bit of revenue, especially college football and college basketball players. I do support, the transfer portal, because we're talking about 17-year-old kids. And sometimes 17-year-olds, they don't make the best decisions. It happens. So I'm a supporter of the transfer portal, but what is evident in the last few years is that we kind of need a new reworked model for not just college football, but potentially in college sports itself. We're at a point where it's becoming abundantly clear that college football is simply a different animal than many other sports. So there's always been this growing idea of someday maybe having a college football commissioner that just handles the college football aspect of college sports. So, like, for example, if like Stanford and Cal want to go play in the ACC for football, that's fine and dandy. But, for other sports, like, would it make sense for cross country to travel to Miami for a cross country meet for an ACC championship one day? It's stuff like that. So I say all this because I was sprucing around on the internet, just minding my own business, and I come across this article from the Washington Post. Now, this article, if you want to read the entirety of the entire article, I'll try to remember to have it in the description or as like a pinned comment, like one of the two, like either or. So to just kind of summarize it and to kind of give my opinion on what I think of this proposal. So, actually, in early December, so this was in last month. So, the new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, he pitched a new subdivision for college sports, just in general. This would be this new subdivision. This think of like your elite programs as kind of having a more formal divide between Power Five and Group of Five. Think of it like that. We have a informal divide. We see how the ACC or like the Big 12 is given more respect in the polls than like the Sun Belt or the American Conference. That's an informal divide by sports media. But we're talking about a more formalized divide where you have this highest level of Division One athletics being in its own division. So, like, essentially thinking like Power Five being its own NCAA division. And then the group of five would be, a separate lower division, right? That makes sense. So Charlie Baker was pitching this idea, and the NCAA, they met last week. Yes, this was an article from the 17th. And the NCAA, they met in Phoenix last week, and they actually set out to provide recommendations on Baker's vision. So nothing official, but this idea is certainly not dead in the water. Now, I'm sure the burning question that you guys would have is, what would it take financially to be a part of that bigger top line division? Well, according to the Washington Post article, it says that it would require member schools to pay at least half of their eligible student athletes a minimum of $30,000 annually through a trust fund. So it makes me wonder what kind of questions that could entail with a trust fund being set up for these athletes. For example, is there going to be any kind of restrictions that are going to be placed on in terms of what these student athletes can spend their money on in this setup trust fund? Like, for example, Like, could they spend it on, say, like housing or, a car, like those kind of things that, you need to get back and forth and have like a roof over your head if you don't live on campus. Would this also affect athletic scholarships as well? We know athletic scholarships cover tuition and in room and board. Would that be replaced by this $30,000 trust fund? If that's the case, then I wouldn't necessarily be a big fan of it. But if it would be extra spending money, then yeah, that could be something that I could certainly get behind. Another interesting thing is that this would be a variety of cost, right? So the cost that it would take for a school to enter this highest level division, the exact cost would be dependent on how many student athletes that you have. And that would be like how many, say, sports do you have at your school? Like at my one of my favorite schools, Cincinnati Bearcats, in this article based on 2022, Cincinnati has a total of 443 student athletes, between male and women. So for UC, their cost to be a part of this highest division will be $6.6 million, which is about 8% of the cost of revenue that their athletics brought in for 2022. Meanwhile, you'll have a school like North Carolina. North Carolina has over 770 student athletes. So their entrance fee to this highest level would be close to $12 million. It's nearly twice as much as what a UC would have to pay. So it also makes you wonder, if schools were struggling to get this funding to enter the highest level division, would you see some sports that are not revenue earning be sacrificed? It's an unfortunate conversation that would be had, because if you were to concern sports, you would drop the number of student athletes that you have, and you would thereby reduce your cost of joining this highest level. But there is some advantages to it, like they can go and set their own rules on NIL, transfer portal, um, when you would be able to play games, like stuff like that. Because what we have known is that the NCAA really isn't the best at adapting and changing, right? So I understand the positives of it, but I'm skeptical of how this proposal would protect the non-revenue earning sports as well. It would be awesome for us, I think, as college football fans, because then you would see more high key matchups, because teams of the same league would, of the same division, would more likely play each other. So I get all of that. I also think that this could also pave a way for a group of five national championship. I've seen this floated on the on Twitter and other social media. So the group of five has had a much harder path, even in this four-team era, than what we've seen, in the past. So like in the four-team era, we've only seen one group of five team do it. We saw Cincinnati make it in 2021, but if we're going to get to a formalized point to where the group of five is going to be its own thing and are going to be completely separate from the Power Five, we should definitely have a group of five national championship. Now, even if this proposal doesn't ultimately happen, I would say that we should still have a group of five playoffs, because even with a 12-team playoff, we might have one, maybe two group of five teams in, but their their path to get in is a lot more difficult than your Power Four. But you could also keep the option open to where, like, if a group of five team actually earns the opportunity to go to the real college football playoff, they would be able to go to that. But a group of five playoff, I think, would be a dope idea for some of these smaller schools that, many of these schools don't have a realistic chance of going to the playoffs. So, circling back to how I feel about this proposal, I do think that there's some things that need to be ironed out, but I certainly think it's a step in the right direction, because I think we do need some leadership that needs to add regulations to NIL, needs to add regulations to the transfer portal because it's a very chaotic time in college football. And hopefully 5 to 10 years from now, we're looking back and we're at a much better place in terms of organization for those two things. But right now, it's just a chaotic time. And while maybe this would not bring the idea of a college football commissioner to the forefront indirectly, I do hope that eventually we get to that point where we see more organization. And that way, the sport would be in an overall much better place than where it's at right now, at least as I'm recording this tonight.